Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast Identity and Influence Series, where we slow leadership down, we get below the surface, and we talk about what actually forms leaders over time. And of course, I'm joined with me today, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Lem Usita. What's up, dude?
Yes, sir. What's going on, man? Just always excited to get on a call and record some of these conversations about leadership. And I think this one's a good one, man. This one's pretty foundational, and it really addresses a lot of things happening in culture. And so let's get into it, man.
Yeah, today's conversation is going to be built around a very small piece that Dr. Lem wrote, and it's gonna catch your attention. It's called "The Aesthetics of Leadership," and aren't we all about aesthetics this year?
Yeah.
So I think you and I are pulling out a lot of themes already, man. I love this,
And
and
we're only
so
in the A's. We're only in the
dude,
A's:
we're
adaptability,
only the A's.
aesthetics.
Shoot, and so aesthetics, they're subtle, right? But very powerful, and our culture is obsessed with appearance, visibility, presentation. It's really reshaping the way that we see things. And so we want to get into that today. So before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and share with somebody that needs to hear this episode. And trust me, they're going to want to hear this episode. So, Dr. Lim, are you ready for my questions?
Ready? Let's go.
All right, let's talk about when appearance becomes authority. Dr.
Yeah.
Lim, you argue that our aesthetic culture trains us to equate appearance with competence. How do you see that playing out in modern leadership spaces right now?
So the impetus of this particular lesson comes from the fact that I'm teaching a college course right now on health. It's a intro to personal health and wellness. And it's so interesting to see how health is communicated and marketed in our ads. A lot of health revolves around aesthetics, looking good, losing weight. If you take this whatever, it's going to just it's going to change your appearance, and it's going to help you do all of these things. And so when you take a look at health, sometimes the appearance of health is actually unhealth. And so, like, you might look good, but like what's driving that is like some lack down deep inside. And so when you're chasing the aesthetics, when you're chasing the look of health, sometimes, many times, you could be unhealthy outside, but because that's what people see, see you look healthy and you're taking all of these things to look healthy and they think you're healthy. So I started thinking about the aesthetics of leadership, what it might look like. We can judge the aesthetics of leadership as looking competent and looking strong and looking confident. But similar to physical health, you might look good on the outside, but many times it just points to unhealth on the inside. You might look and have the aesthetic of a leader, but are you a leader on the inside? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can lead or are a leader on the inside, even if you just have, the aesthetics of leadership.
Yeah. So, at what point does confidence stop being a leadership strength and start becoming performance that hides deeper weaknesses that we really don't want others to see?
So some things that I say quite often in this leadership podcast is sometimes leadership is just the loudest person in the room. Just because you got everyone's attention quickly doesn't necessarily mean that you thought through the problem well enough to lead people. It just means that you were loud. So sometimes leadership is like, hey, and I've seen this like with I ran a leadership program, and we would do these initiatives to try to see people's personalities and to see who emerges as a leader. And typically, like the loudest person, okay, you guys have got this figured out. Like you just shared the problem, and somebody like immediately the loudest person says they got it all figured out. And they're able to get everyone's attention, but they haven't done the work of thinking through or processing through the problem. And so they look like a leader, they sound confident, and they're able to get everybody's attention, but they can't lead. They can't lead people through the problem because they haven't taken the time to slow down and think through it. So you can have the confidence of getting everyone's attention, and maybe you might have people follow you, but you haven't thought through the problem well enough to actually lead people to a solution to the problem. And if you're this, typically, I watch, if you're the first to speak out loud, I'm not following that guy because they haven't spent any time processing through the problem or the issue, you know? So confidence is good, don't get me wrong, but speed, I think, is the differentiator, right? And deep thinking and awareness and wisdom. Yeah, I mean, you can look like a leader and get everyone's attention. It gets my attention definitely. And I'm like, that's not the guy that I want to follow first.
Man, I agree. I think usually the first person to talk is like, okay, let's get these people out of the way and then we'll figure it out. But I mean, visibility and presence, they're important, right? So
Yeah, on
leaders,
100%.
you do want to be visible, you want to be present, but how do we have both visibility and presence without letting those things replace substance and responsibility, which is what leadership is really about? Or as one of my mentors told me, the first person to shirk responsibility is the first person I know is not a leader, and so on and so forth. So if we
Yeah.
want substance, if we want responsibility, how do we have those things and then work within the whole visibility and presence thing?
Yeah, I really like that you highlight that. I still think it's important to have the aesthetics of leadership just because we're talking about it. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not saying that's not important. You need to look like a leader. You need to dress professionally. You need to have the confidence. But I think what we're trying to highlight is because you look like a leader, that doesn't necessarily mean you are a leader. So do the work of leadership. Slow down, reflect, evaluate, don't react. Actually, do the work of leadership, not just have the look of leadership. So yes, visibility and presence matters, but have substance and responsibility as well. I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah. So let's talk about cosmetic leadership versus formative leadership. You introduced this idea. So, whether explicitly or implicitly, that there's something called cosmetic leadership. And so, how would you distinguish that from leadership that's genuinely formative?
I think the distinguishing factor is speed. The work of true leadership, like shaping culture, forming judgment, holding tension, sitting in complexity, most of that is largely invisible, right? And slow, it's invisible and slow. Cosmetic leadership offers immediate signals, decisiveness, charisma, clarity, relatability, fast, speed, instant, right now. So it's easier to reward what you can see and the immediate. So I think speed is the distinguishing factor. Similar to what we were just saying, the first person to speak out loud and get everyone's attention, they haven't thought through the thing yet. So it's speed, I think, is the differentiator and the distinguishing factor.
Yeah. So, why do you think that concepts like presence, gravitas, authenticity, voice, in terms of how loud you could be, have become so
Yeah.
central in leadership language today?
Yeah, those are the things that people see, right? Those are the external things. Like they look like a leader, presence, gravitas. And again, we've been talking about this whole episode, like being the loudest and having a voice. It's the stuff that is external. It's the stuff that's easy to notice. But that idea of authenticity, like true authenticity is key, especially in a world of deep fakes, right? Like you can't tell what's real anymore. So I think authenticity is the one thing that stands out. But for the most part, I think a lot of leadership language and a lot of books talk about like the external things. Like it's not just about adding skill, right? Or doing a thing, it's about the skills and doing the thing that's born out of your leadership formation, right? It's born out of who you are. So you lead out of who you are. And so, you can fake it and you can just do the surfacey stuff. And you might be able to get leadership roles in light of that. But a true leader leads out of formation. A true leader leads out of who they are.
Mm. So, what gets lost when leadership is evaluated by how compelling it feels in the moment rather than what it produces over time? So, people, systems, process.
What gets lost is true leadership. The deep slow, reflective work of leadership. There is substance and depth when you focus on people and systems, right? You can actually change people and you can change the culture when you're working on that level. If you just look like a leader and you're the loudest, you can still lead. And I think a lot of organizations hire leaders that look good, that are loud, that are charismatic and confident. But then take a look at the news, right? They crumble when the pressure is on. And so you can get those leadership roles on the aesthetics of leadership, but in order to keep them, in order to make true change, you need depth and you need substance. So I think what gets lost is just leadership itself, true leadership.
Yeah, let's talk about one of your favorite things, identity, formation, the long game. So you suggest that this shift towards authentic leadership is a reflection of deeper confusion about identity. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that so that our listeners might be able to tap into the stuff that they're dealing with in their own identity process?
Yeah, if it's aesthetic leadership, then your identity becomes external. It becomes what people see, right? Aesthetic leadership is not the deep work of formation. You're just like we were saying, you're just tacking on skills to look like a leader. You're just putting on that look. You're not growing as a leader, and your identity isn't a leadership. Um, you just look like a leader, which but when you lead out of leadership, when you lead out of depth and character and identity, then everything that you do is leadership because the leadership is happening from the inside. The leadership is your identity. You lead out of who you are. So when you are a leader, everything that you do ends up being about leadership as opposed to just doing and looking like a leader. And so, like I think the deep confusion is that when it's aesthetic, it's external, but when it's authentic, it's deep, it's substantive, it's who you are.
So, how does personal branding change the way leaders relate to roles, institution, and even stewardship?
So personal branding isn't bad, and it isn't bad at all. But the difference is, does the personal brand represent the true self, or does the personal brand represent just the aesthetic look of a leader? It's only bad when you're lying in your marketing, right? So when your personal branding says, I can do this, and it's a lie, then that's when personal branding is bad. But personal brand that is consistent with true self, is consistent with leadership, is consistent with depth of character, then that personal brand, like I'm all about because I'm actually working with a leader, working with somebody that understands their identity formation and their leadership formation. So personal branding in and of itself is not bad. It's what, it reflects in what it represents. And so if personal branding is aesthetic, gonna be surfacey and shallow. If it's authentic, then it's gonna be deep and substantive.
Man, I'm glad that you didn't say that personal branding is bad because I'm all about personal branding.
Oh, it's
I
good.
want to
It's
be on
good.
brand, but you're right.
Yeah.
It's you do want to be authentic. You want to make sure that people know who you are. I always tell people like, you're your brand, like whether you go from one place to another, the only thing you bring is you. And so
Yeah.
it's really about learning the true self. So that actually gives some clarity in the way that a lot of times that I'm helping people understand. And
Yeah.
I love that, the true self. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
steal that one.
Hey, go for it.
Last question. So if the answer isn't anti aesthetic leadership, what does integrated leadership actually look like in practice?
Yeah, so hear me clearly. I'm not saying that aesthetics of a leader is a bad thing. What I am saying in this article is if the aesthetics of a leader coincides with a deep, substantive character and culture of leadership, then it's great. But the aesthetics of a leader that's surfacey, that's the problem. So an integrated leadership is when the aesthetics of the leader is integrated with the authenticity of leadership, when there's true leadership formation and you lead out of who you are. So that's what I would say about an integrated leadership, when the aesthetics and the authenticity actually is integrated.
I love it, brother. This is a great topic. I know we're going to talk about this more. And so,
Hmm.
listeners, if you like this conversation, especially in a leadership culture that's about rewarding speed and optics and constant
Yeah.
visibility, we're glad that you stopped by and joined this conversation with us. So, again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Sign up for our newsletter, and we'll see you for the next one. Dr. Lem, thanks a lot, brother.
Thank you so much.